The crystal spires of the Zephyrian capital gleamed under twin suns, their surfaces reflecting the pride of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. Admiral Kethvar stood on the observation deck of his flagship, watching patrol vessels drift between the massive structures like silver fish in a cosmic ocean. His forearms were crossed behind his back, and his large black eyes showed the boredom of someone who had never known real challenge. The communication panel beside him buzzed with an incoming report. Scout Captain Vextar appeared on the holographic display, his blue-scaled face showing mild excitement. "Admiral, we have discovered another primitive world in the Outer Rim territories," Vextar said. "The third planet orbiting a yellow star. They call Sol. The inhabitants call themselves humans." Kethvar barely glanced at the display. "Another backwater species, I assume. Have they achieved faster-than-light travel?" "No, Admiral. They are still confined to their home system. They have sent crude metal ships to their moon and nearby planets, but nothing more advanced." "Then catalog them and move on," Kethvar said, with a wave of his hand. "Add their system to the expansion list for next cycle. Anything else worth mentioning?" Vextar hesitated. They seemed to broadcast many signals into space: entertainment, news, historical records. Science Officer Velthara has been studying these transmissions. She requested permission to compile a full report. "Velthara always requests full reports," Kethvar said with annoyance. "Tell her to submit the standard survey data and nothing more. We have 47 star systems to govern. I will not waste time on every primitive species we encounter." The connection ended, and Kethvar turned back to his view of the capital. Below him, millions of beings from dozens of conquered worlds went about their daily tasks. They served the Empire without question because they had learned long ago that resistance was pointless. The Zephyrian military machine was perfect, unstoppable, and efficient. On the survey ship orbiting Jupiter, Science Officer Velthara ignored her admiral's dismissive orders. Something about the human transmissions disturbed her in ways she could not explain. She had studied hundreds of species during her career, but none had produced the kind of data she was seeing from Earth. She pulled up another file on her workstation. The humans called it a documentary about something they named World War II. Velthara watched in growing horror as the small bipedal creatures described killing 60 million of their own kind in just 6 years. The images showed massive armies, cities reduced to ash, and weapons that could destroy entire populations. "This cannot be accurate," she whispered to herself. "No species could survive such self-destruction." She opened another file. This one was about their ancient history. Humans had been fighting constant wars for thousands of years. They fought over land, resources, ideas, and sometimes for reasons that made no sense at all. Every generation produced new ways to kill. Every century brought deadlier weapons. What shocked Velthara most was not the violence itself. Many species had violent periods in their development. What shocked her was that humans had never stopped. Even as they reached for the stars, they continued building weapons. Even as they discovered how to heal diseases, they found new ways to spread death. She accessed more files. Humans had survived ice ages that should have killed them. They had turned wolves into loyal companions. They had climbed the highest mountains and explored the deepest oceans, not because they needed to, but because those places existed. They seemed driven by a need to conquer everything around them, including their own limitations. The more Velthara learned, the more frightened she became. Humans had never known true peace. They had evolved in constant struggle, not just against each other, but against a world that seemed designed to kill them. Their planet was covered with deadly animals, poisonous plants, and natural disasters that would terrify most civilized species, and yet they had not just survived. They had thrived. She began compiling her report despite Admiral Kethvar's orders. The Empire needed to understand what they were dealing with. These were not the usual primitive beings who would surrender at the first sign of superior technology. These were predators who had spent their entire existence learning how to fight and survive. Her report grew longer as she discovered more disturbing facts. Humans had created weapons that could destroy their entire world several times over. They had split atoms to make bombs. They had turned diseases into weapons. They had even learned to fight in the vacuum of space, an environment that most species considered impossible to survive in. But what worried Velthara most was human adaptability. Every time they faced a new challenge, they found a way to overcome, yet every time they encountered a stronger enemy, they became stronger themselves. They seemed to learn from every defeat and grow stronger from every loss. She finished her report and sent it directly to the High Command, bypassing Admiral Kethvar. The document was 300 pages long and included detailed analysis of human warfare, technology, and psychology. Her conclusion was simple but urgent. Humanity was unlike any species the Empire had ever encountered, and any contact should be approached with extreme caution. The response came back within hours. High Commander Zethmal himself had reviewed her report and found it ridiculous. Her recommendation for caution was labeled as cowardice. Her detailed analysis was dismissed as the paranoid fantasies of an officer who had spent too much time studying primitive cultures. Science Officer Velthara, the official response read, "Your concerns about this human species are noted but considered unfounded. The Zephyrian Empire has successfully integrated 847 species over 3 millennia. No primitive culture has ever posed a significant threat to our expansion. Your request for additional study time is denied. Report to Admiral Kethvar for standard invasion preparation duties." Velthara stared at the message with growing dread. She had tried to warn them. She had shown them evidence of human capabilities that should have terrified any reasonable military commander. But the Empire's arrogance was too great. They could not imagine that a species without faster-than-light travel could pose any real threat. She made one last attempt, sending a personal message to Admiral Kethvar himself. "Admiral, I respectfully request that you review my analysis of human combat capabilities. This species may require different approach than our standard invasion protocols." Kethvar's response was swift and harsh. "Science Officer Velthara, your job is to catalog new species, not to question military strategy. The humans will surrender like all the others, or they will be destroyed like all the others. There is no third option. Prepare for standard invasion procedures." As Velthara watched the First Fleet prepare for departure to Earth, she felt a cold certainty in her hearts. The Empire was about to make the greatest mistake in its 3,000-year history. They were about to attack a species that had never learned how to surrender, a species that had turned warfare into an art form, a species that grew stronger with every challenge. The warnings had been ignored. Soon the Empire would learn why that was a fatal error. The Zephyrian First Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system like a silver storm. 200 warships spread across the darkness, their crystal hulls gleaming with deadly purpose. Admiral Kethvar stood on his command bridge, watching the small blue world that would soon bow before Zephyrian might. "Begin standard invasion broadcast," he ordered. "All frequencies, all languages we have decoded." The message went out across Earth's communication networks. Images of Zephyrian power-filled television screens, radio waves, and internet connections. The alien admiral's voice, translated by computer systems, delivered the same ultimatum the Empire had used on hundreds of worlds. "Primitive humans of Earth, you are now subjects of the Zephyrian Empire. Surrender immediately and your lives will be spared. Resist and face total destruction. You have 1 hour to respond." In the underground, command center beneath Colorado Springs, General Pete Jackson watched the alien transmission with grim determination. Around him, military leaders from every nation on Earth studied tactical displays showing the massive enemy fleet. The numbers were not encouraging. Earth had 12 operational space combat vessels. The aliens had brought 200. "Sir," said Colonel Amy Rodriguez, her voice steady despite the circumstances, "all global defense networks are online. Every military unit is at full alert. We've distributed the captured alien weapon schematics to all major cities." 3 weeks earlier, a small Zephyrian scout ship had made the mistake of getting too close to Earth's moon. Captain Jake Sullivan, commanding the experimental fighter craft Eagle 1, had managed to damage the alien vessel before it could escape. The wreckage provided humanity's first look at Zephyrian technology. Any response from the United Nations? Jackson asked. The same response from every nation, sir. No surrender, no negotiation. We fight. Jackson nodded. He had expected. Nothing less. Humanity had faced extinction before. Ice ages, plagues, natural disasters, and their own endless wars had all tried to destroy them. They were still here. They would still be here when the last Zephyrian ship was nothing but debris in space. The hour passed in tense preparation. Then Admiral Kethavar received Earth's official response. It came not from governments or diplomats, but from an elderly man standing in the ruins of a bombed church in London. My name is Father William Brooks, the human said, his voice calm and clear. I speak for all of humanity when I say this. We have heard your demand for surrender. Our answer is no. It has always been no. It will always be no. If you want our world, come and take it. Kethavar stared at the transmission in disbelief. They refuse? A primitive species with 12 ships refuses an empire with 200? Perhaps they do not understand our power, suggested his tactical officer. Then we will teach them, Kethavar snarled. Begin the attack. Target their major cities first. They will surrender once they see we are serious. The first wave of Zephyrian fighters screamed through Earth's atmosphere, their energy weapons charging for the killing blow. They expected to find panic, chaos, and quick surrender. Instead, they found something that had never appeared in any Zephyrian tactical manual. They found humans who had been preparing for this moment their entire lives. Captain Jake Sullivan led Earth's small space fleet in a desperate charge against impossible odds. His ship, hastily upgraded with reverse-engineered alien technology, dove straight into the enemy formation. Behind him, 11 other human vessels followed, their crews singing old battle songs over the radio. Remember, Sullivan broadcast to his pilots, we're not trying to win, we're trying to make them pay for every inch. The space battle that followed lasted only minutes, but those minutes changed everything. Human ships did not retreat when damaged. They accelerated toward enemy vessels using their own destruction as weapons. Damaged human fighters did not eject their pilots. They guided their burning craft into Zephyrian capital ships like guided missiles. Of the 12 human ships, 11 were destroyed, but they took 43 Zephyrian vessels with them. For the first time in 3,000 years, a Zephyrian fleet had lost more ships than they had destroyed. On the ground, the Zephyrian invasion forces found an even stranger situation. They had landed expecting to fight soldiers. Instead, they fought an entire species. In New York City, construction worker Danny Miller used his crane to drop concrete blocks on Zephyrian hover tanks. In Tokyo, school teacher Nancy Kim led her students in building improvised bombs from chemistry supplies. In London, retired nurse Betty White turned her hospital into a fortress, treating wounded fighters while coordinating resistance attacks. Colonel Amy Rodriguez had spent years studying every guerrilla war in human history. Now she put that knowledge to use. Her forces did not fight like traditional armies. They struck from shadows, disappeared into crowds, and turned every building into a potential weapon. The Zephyrians had expected to face soldiers following military rules. Instead, they faced grandmothers with hunting rifles, teenagers with homemade explosives, and children who served as messengers through underground tunnels. Every human seemed to understand warfare instinctively, as if they had been born for it. In a basement laboratory in Berlin, Dr. Kevin Park worked with salvaged alien technology. The physics professor had never seen anything like Zephyrian energy shields, but he approached the problem like any other scientific puzzle. Within 72 hours, he had found a weakness in their defensive systems. The shield frequency rotates every 30 seconds, he explained to a room full of resistance fighters. But there's a gap during the rotation, 0.03 seconds, where they're completely vulnerable. How do we time something that fast? Asked Maria Santos, a former Olympic athlete turned resistance leader. Park smiled grimly. We don't time it. We predict it. He held up a device made from alien components and human computer parts. This will tell you exactly when to fire. The shieldbreaker technology spread across the globe within hours. Human communication networks, built for sharing information instantly, carried the breakthrough to every resistance cell on Earth. For the first time since the invasion began, human weapons started killing Zephyrian soldiers in significant numbers. Admiral Kethvar watched the casualty reports with growing disbelief. His forces were losing thousands of soldiers daily. Cities that should have fallen in hours were still fighting after weeks. Every time his troops adapted to human tactics, the humans developed new ones. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his staff. "They are primitives. They should have surrendered by now." Science Officer Velthara, monitoring communications from the fleet's science vessel, had a different perspective. She had been listening to human radio transmissions throughout the invasion. What she heard terrified her more than any weapon. Humans were learning. Every battle taught them something new about Zephyrian technology. Every defeat showed them a weakness to exploit. Every loss made them more determined to win. They were not just fighting an invasion, they were treating it as the ultimate learning experience, and they were very fast learners. "Admiral," Velthara said carefully, "I recommend we call for reinforcements." Kethvar's eyes widened in shock. "Reinforcements? Against a primitive species that cannot even leave their home system? Sir, our casualties are approaching 30%. At current rates, we will lose our entire invasion force within 6 months." For the first time in his career, Admiral Kethvar faced the unthinkable possibility that his fleet might actually lose to a species of primitives. The idea was so impossible, so contrary to everything he believed about Zephyrian superiority, that he could barely comprehend it. But the numbers did not lie. The humans were winning. The Zephyrian Second Fleet arrived at Earth 6 months after the first invasion began. Admiral Kethvar had requested 50 additional ships to finish what should have been a simple conquest. Instead, High Command sent him 100 ships and a new co-commander, Admiral Vexthul, who had never lost a battle in 400 years of service. "Explain to me how primitives have held you back for half a year," Vexthul demanded as soon as he boarded Kethvar's flagship. Kethvar gestured toward the tactical display showing Earth. Red markers indicated ongoing battles across every continent. "They do not fight like any species we have encountered. They do not follow military rules. They do not surrender when defeated. All species surrender when shown enough force," Vexthul replied coldly. "You have been too gentle. I will show you how to end this quickly." But Vexthul's confidence lasted only 3 days. His attempt to demonstrate proper invasion technique by attacking the human city of Sydney ended in disaster. The humans had turned the entire city into a trap. Buildings collapsed on command. Underground tunnels allowed fighters to appear anywhere. And the harbor itself had been filled with floating bombs disguised as debris. Worse, the humans had learned to use captured Zephyrian technology better than the Zephyrians themselves. Their modified weapons cut through alien armor like paper. Their stolen shield generators protected important targets with power levels that should have been impossible. Dr. Kevin Park, working in his hidden laboratory, had made breakthrough after breakthrough. He had not only understood alien faster-than-light travel, but had improved it. The first human-built FTL ship, called Retribution, launched from a secret base in the Australian desert, while the Zephyrians were still fighting in Sydney. Captain Ben Carter, a former Navy pilot, commanded the Retribution and its crew of 30 volunteers. Their mission was simple but ambitious: strike the Zephyrian fuel depot at Proxima Centauri and prove that humans could take the fight to alien territory. "Remember," Carter told his crew as they prepared for humanity's first interstellar attack, "we're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting for every species that has ever faced these bullies." The journey to Proxima Centauri took 18 hours. The Retribution emerged from hyperspace near the fuel depot, a massive station that supplied the entire Zephyrian fleet. The station's commander, Administrator Polvek, had received no warning that humans had developed FTL capability. "Impossible," Polvek whispered as his sensors detected the approaching human ship. "They cannot be here. Their technology is too primitive." But the Retribution was very real, and Captain Carter had no intention of fighting fair. His ship approached the station broadcasting Zephyrian identification codes, copied from captured enemy transmissions. The humans had learned to speak the alien language fluently in just 6 months. Fuel Station Alpha 7, this is Fleet Transport. Designation Keth-49 requesting emergency docking, Carter said in perfect Zephyrian. We have critical damage and need immediate repairs. The deception worked. Station security allowed the Retribution to dock, and 30 human soldiers stormed aboard before anyone realized what was happening. They moved through the station with deadly efficiency, using tactics that Zephyrian defenders had never seen before. Within 2 hours, the humans controlled the entire facility. They downloaded every piece of technical data in the station's computers, learned the locations of other Zephyrian bases, and discovered something that changed everything. The Empire was not as strong as it appeared. The captured files revealed that the Zephyrian Empire ruled through fear and overwhelming force, but their actual military was stretched thin across dozens of rebellions. Many conquered species were held in line only by the threat of massive retaliation. Some worlds had been waiting centuries for a chance to revolt. Captain Carter made a decision that would reshape the galaxy. Instead of simply destroying the fuel depot, he broadcast a message to every world in the Zephyrian Empire. The message was simple but revolutionary. To all enslaved peoples of the galaxy, Carter said, his words transmitted through the Zephyrian communication network. This is Captain Ben Carter of the human species. We are the people of Earth, and we have been fighting the Zephyrian Empire for 6 months. We are winning. You do not have to live in fear anymore. You do not have to serve masters who see you as slaves. Fight back. We will help you. The message included detailed plans for making weapons from common materials, tactics for fighting Zephyrian troops, and, most importantly, proof that the Empire could be defeated. The fuel depot's destruction, broadcast live across the galaxy, showed that Zephyrian facilities could be captured and destroyed by supposedly primitive species. The response was immediate and overwhelming. On the mining world of Velkar, slaves had been digging rare metals for the Empire for 600 years. When they heard Carter's message, Foreman Kolvar led his workers in seizing the mining equipment and turning it into weapons. Within days, the entire planet was in revolt. On the agricultural world of Theron, farmers who had been forced to feed Zephyrian armies for generations stopped shipping food to the Empire. Instead, they began growing crops that could be turned into explosives. Agricultural specialist Lisa Roberts, a human captured during the early days of the invasion, had been secretly teaching them human farming techniques. Now, those techniques included bomb making. The rebellion spread faster than the Empire could respond. Every world that rose up inspired others to follow. The Zephyrian military, designed to fight external enemies, was not prepared for simultaneous revolts across half their territory. Admiral Kethvar watched his empire crumble from the command deck of his flagship. Ships that should have been attacking Earth were being recalled to fight rebels on dozens of worlds. Supply lines were cut. Communication networks were jammed by rebel broadcasts. How did this happen? He demanded of Science Officer Velthara, who had been monitoring the spreading chaos. The humans did something we never expected, she replied quietly. They shared their knowledge. Every species they contact learns human fighting methods. Every world they inspire becomes a training ground for rebellion. On Earth, General Pete Jackson coordinated the global response to the expanding war. Volunteers traveled to rebel worlds, teaching alien species how to fight their oppressors. Colonel Amy Rodriguez led training missions to 7 different planets, showing former slaves how to turn their work tools into weapons. The humans did not conquer these worlds. They liberated them, and then helped them defend themselves. Every species that joined the rebellion became stronger and more capable. Every victory inspired more worlds to rise up. Dr. Nancy Kim, a former teacher who had become an expert in alien languages, established communication networks between rebel worlds. She helped coordinate attacks, shared intelligence, and most importantly, spread hope. The Empire kept us apart because they knew we were stronger together, she broadcast to rebel leaders across the galaxy. Now we are together, and they cannot stop us. The war that had begun with one fleet attacking one world had become a galaxy-wide revolution, and at the center of it all were humans, the species that had refused to surrender, refused to give up, and refused to let others suffer under tyranny. Admiral Kethvar finally understood what Velthara had tried to warn him about. Humans were not just warriors. They were a plague of freedom that spread to every world they touched. And now it was too late to stop them. 5 years after the first Zephyrian ship entered Earth's solar system, the Zephyrian Empire was dying. Half of their worlds had declared independence. Their trade routes were controlled by human-trained rebels. Their mighty fleet was scattered across 100 battlefronts, fighting desperate battles against species they had once easily dominated. Emperor Zefthul sat alone in his crystal palace on the capital world, watching reports of another defeat. The mining world of Kethvar had fallen to rebel forces. The agricultural planet of Velthos had stopped all food shipments to imperial worlds. Even the military academy on Zarthek had been overrun by its own students, inspired by human broadcasts about freedom and resistance. "My lord," said his aide, Commander Pelthar, "Admiral Kethvar requests permission to retreat from Earth. His fleet has suffered 80% casualties." The Emperor's 4 hands clenched into fists. Retreat? From primitives who could not even leave their home world 5 years ago? "My lord, they are no longer confined to their world. Human ships have been spotted in 17 different star systems. They are training rebels, supplying weapons, and coordinating attacks across the entire Outer Rim." Emperor Zefthul had ruled for 200 years. He had inherited an empire that stretched across 47 star systems and commanded the loyalty of over 500 billion beings. Now that empire was crumbling, and the cause was a single species of bipedal creatures from a small blue world. "Bring me Science Officer Velthara," he commanded. "I want to understand how this happened." Velthara arrived within the hour, her scaled face showing the weariness of someone who had watched her worst predictions come true. She had spent 5 years studying human behavior, and what she had learned terrified her more than any weapon. "You were right," the Emperor said without preamble. "Your warnings about the humans were accurate. Tell me what we face." Velthara activated a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Red areas marked rebel-controlled territory. Blue showed remaining Imperial worlds. Yellow indicated contested systems. More than half the display glowed red. "The humans are not like other species," she began. "When we conquer a world, the inhabitants eventually accept their fate and serve the Empire. When humans encounter a conquered world, they teach the inhabitants to free themselves." "But how? How can primitives defeat our technology?" "They are not primitives anymore, my lord. Human learning speed is unlike anything we have ever documented. They reverse engineer our technology within weeks, then improve it beyond our capabilities. But their real weapon is not technology. It is hope." The Emperor leaned forward in his throne. "Explain." "Every species we have conquered lived in isolation. They fought alone and lost alone. Humans refuse to let anyone fight alone. They share everything they learn. They coordinate attacks across multiple star systems. They turn individual rebellions into galaxy-wide revolution." As if summoned by their conversation, alarms began blaring throughout the palace. Imperial Guard units rushed through the corridors as reports flooded in from the outer system. A massive fleet had just emerged from hyperspace, heading directly for the capital world. "My lord," Commander Pelthar announced. "Long-range scanners show 200 ships approaching. Leading vessel identifies itself as the human battleship, Defiance. They are demanding your immediate surrender." Emperor Zefthul felt something he had never experienced before, genuine fear. 200 ships? How do humans have 200 ships? "They do not travel alone, my lord," Velthara said quietly. "Intelligence reports indicate the fleet includes vessels from over 30 different species, all former Imperial subjects, all trained by humans, all united under human leadership." The Emperor stood and walked to his balcony, looking up at the twin suns that had shone on Zephyrian glory for millennia. Already he could see distant flashes of light as the approaching fleet engaged his orbital defense platforms. The defenses that had protected the capital for 3,000 years were falling within hours. Admiral Kate Bishop stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the final approach to the Zephyrian homeworld. Around her ship flew vessels from dozens of species, each one crewed by beings who had once served the Empire as slaves. Now they flew as equals in the Human Liberation Alliance. "Admiral," reported Captain Tony Martinez from the communication station, "the planetary defenses are down. All major military installations have surrendered. The Emperor's palace is the last stronghold remaining." Bishop nodded. She was a career Navy officer who had risen through the ranks during the 5-year war. She had fought in space battles, led ground invasions, and trained rebel forces on a dozen worlds. Now she stood at the moment that would end the war that had consumed half the galaxy. "Open a channel to the palace," she ordered. "Let me speak directly to the Emperor." The connection established, Bishop found herself looking at the most powerful being in the known galaxy. Emperor Zeph Thul appeared ancient and tired, his once proud bearing replaced by defeat. "Emperor Zeph Thul," Bishop said, her voice calm, but firm. "I am Admiral Kate Bishop of the Human Liberation Alliance. Your empire is finished. Your fleets are destroyed or in retreat. Your worlds have chosen freedom over slavery. You have 2 choices: surrender and live, or fight and die." The Emperor studied the human woman who had helped destroy his civilization. She looked so ordinary, so unremarkable, yet she commanded the loyalty of species from across the galaxy. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "Justice," Bishop replied. "Not revenge, justice. Your empire will end today, but your people do not have to die. Surrender now and we will help you build something better." Emperor Zeph Thul looked around his throne room at the crystal walls that had witnessed 3 millennia of imperial glory. Through the windows he could see human ships landing in his capital city, not to destroy but to liberate. Already crowds of his own people were in the streets, welcoming the humans as heroes rather than conquerors. "What guarantee do I have that you will not simply replace our empire with your own?" he asked. Admiral Bishop smiled, the expression both confident and kind. "Because that is not who we are. We do not conquer worlds, Emperor. We free them, and then we help them stay free." The surrender ceremony took place in the same crystal palace where the Zephyrian Empire had been ruled for 3,000 years. But instead of a conqueror claiming a throne, it became something unprecedented in galactic history: the founding of a true alliance of free worlds. Captain Lisa Morgan, the same officer who had made first contact with the Zephyrians 5 years earlier, now served as the first director of galactic affairs. She stood before representatives from over 200 species, including former Zephyrian worlds that had chosen to join the alliance as equals rather than subjects. "Today marks the end of empire and the beginning of partnership," she announced to the assembly. "No world will rule over others. No species will serve as slaves. We stand together as equals, united by our common belief that freedom is the right of all thinking beings." Science Officer Velthara, who had tried so desperately to warn her people about human nature, now served as chief advisor to the new Galactic Council. She had spent years studying what made humans different from other species, and she finally understood. Humans had never known peace because they had never accepted injustice. They fought not just for themselves, but for the idea that everyone deserved to be free. They were willing to die for strangers, to sacrifice their own comfort for others' liberty, and to never stop fighting until everyone was safe. Dr. Sarah Brooks, now head of the Galactic Research Council, established schools on every member world where children from hundreds of species learned together. They studied history, science, and most importantly, the principles that had built their new civilization. The Zephyrian War became the most important lesson taught in these schools, not as a story of human superiority, but as proof that united, any challenge could be overcome. The war had lasted 5 years and reshaped the galaxy, but its most important lesson was simple. Freedom shared is freedom multiplied. The galaxy had learned to ignore warnings about humans at their own peril. But in the end, humanity's greatest threat to tyrants everywhere was not their capacity for war, but their absolute refusal to let anyone suffer in silence. The Empire was dead. The Alliance lived. And the stars belonged to everyone.